Well, today's topic is one that I came up with, and this is what I got. Game mechanics and features that create cinematic play. What I was looking for here is things that are built into the game that, for people at the table, create images in their heads of amazing things that you would want to see on a big screen. As an example, we'll go back to last week's episode. The Bronze Dragon. One of the layer actions of the Bronze Dragon is the Salt Burst.
Mm-hmm.
The Salt Burst. So if I'm sitting here at the table and I'm describing this amazing blast of teeny tiny little pieces of salt that are shredding your skin and damaging you for, I roll, 42 damage. And this salt just comes blasting out of a central location. That's what I'm talking about,
Mm-hmm.
where everybody at the table gets this picture in their head of what this looks like. That's what I'm talking about. So most of my things, we have a top 5.
Yes.
Don't have to rank them necessarily, but there are 5 things that came to mind when we were thinking about cinematic play. Mine are basically revolve around the characters.
Okay.
So I don't know if you have...
Yeah. Do you mean class?
No, just in something characters would do or use.
Okay. So mine is similar, but I tried to pick one from 5 different classes.
Cool.
And spread them out so that obviously you can kind of group magic, casters together in one way.
Sure.
That sort of thing.
Yeah, mine kind of fall into that as well. I've got I have 2 classes that would be specifically directed to, and the others are generally directed to different classes. So I'll go ahead and start.
Mm-hmm.
And my number 5 is a cop-out, but at the same time it's not, because I think table rules. Most table rules are built around creating something cool that can happen in a game where maybe it's outside of the book rules, but the DM and the players have all agreed that if this happens, it becomes more, fun to play, becomes more potentially visible or visual or something like that. And the one that I think about, and this is it's cinematic, but sort of in a dull and sort of behind the scenes sort of way. But our big table rule, and I say it's big because I made it, but we'll go with it, is that in the rules of Dungeons and Dragons, when you heal completely.
You take a long rest, you're back.
You're back.
Yeah.
We erased that and we said, no. That's not realistic for me. That's not cinematic enough. When we're beat up, I want to be beat up for a while unless we have the means to magically fix that.
Mm-hmm.
And so our table rule is during a long rest, you get to roll a hit die and add your modifier, your Constitution modifier, and that's what you heal overnight.
Mm-hmm.
If you take a short rest, it's just the modifier. Otherwise, you need magic to get you back to, a full health or something like that. I see that as cinematic because it's realistic. Mm-hmm. It's more Daredevil than it is MCU, if that makes sense. The heroes all go off and fight in Endgame, and the next day they might have a bruise or something, but they're all walking normally. In Daredevil, he's down for the count after he gets his butt whipped, and he's limping, and he's got his arm broken or something like that, and that lasts a little while.
I don't know if it's a post-credit scene or deleted scene, but at the end of the first Avengers, when they're all sitting around eating shawarma,
yeah,
that is a little more what you're saying.
Yes.
They're feeling rough.
Yes, exactly. So the table rules that we add oftentimes lend themselves to that dramatic, visual amazingness that the game can bring.
So my first one is more on the quirky end of visual, and that is with the rogue, a rogue tabaxi specifically.
Nice.
Bonus action dash.
Yes. I did that last time we played.
Yes. And then you can do the zoomies with your cat.
Yep.
And in my mind, if I'm like everybody else, YouTube has been populating with cat videos for me. Yeah. And the ones where they have the overdub John Cena and the cat's doing something amazing, right, flipping around. That's kind of what I imagine.
You're about to get one here.
Yes, I was going to say the cat that you heard yowling last week is in the room, and she is rolling around on the desk and is about ready to fall off.
Precariously on the edge. I mean,
and she does
seriously.
not know her own BMI, so she's going to come flying down. But anyway, I thought that would just be a fun thing to describe, is the tabaxi just sort of jumping from ledge to ledge and zooming around. And, you know. So.
I love it. So I had a picture in my head when my cat Smokey, in our online game, did the move you're talking about, got the zoomies and went from one end of a large room to the other end of a large room to hide in a corner. And I pictured my tabaxi going all fours and just like back legs in the air, just taking off and zooming across the room. And so, no, I totally, that's very fitting to what I'm talking about with the game mechanics that create cinematic play.
Cool.
Love it. All right. My number 4 is very simple. It's spellcasting components. And what I mean by that is not literally like the ginseng or the bone marrow that you ground up to do whatever. It's the other two. It's the verbal and somatic that I think can be really just on any given day. If you play a wizard or a sorcerer or a warlock, really look into this, because you can do some fun things at the table to get people sort of involved in the whole thing. What I liked was, and I took some quotes right out of the book, and it's the same in both the 2014 and 2015 or 2025 books. They did not change the language on either one of the verbal or somatic. It speaks for verbal. It says the words themselves aren't the source of the spell's power. So you can say whatever the heck you want. Make up words, whatever. The spell's power, rather, comes from the combination of sounds, pitch, resonance, pace. That is what sets the threads of magic in motion. So when you're at the table and you're about to, cast something that's going to be loud and grand like a fireball, dude, make it sound like you're casting a fireball. And then boom, it goes. And some of the spells also include, besides the verbal, the somatic. And the somatic are basically the gestures. Quoting forceful gesticulation or an intricate set of gestures form the magic. So think Doctor Strange. When he does his like circling of his hands and his fingers and he goes, blah, or something like that. Do that at the table. Everyone will get a picture of what your character sounds like and looks like, and they'll enjoy besides just rolling dice and saying it does this damage or saying I'm casting aid on you. Cast it on them, and everyone at the table will start really getting involved and getting pictures in their heads of what this looks like.
That would be our buddy Jared, when he played Vedolkin. I forget where the source book is for that particular species, but anyway, he played a wizard, and he actually, ahead of every game, went to Google Translate and looked up Icelandic versions of whatever it is he was going to say.
Cool.
So that added a lot.
And really you do this. I wrote this note down and I almost missed it. So I'm glad you said that, because you do this with your bard. You do vicious mockery, and you always have something really nasty or funny to say that would be hurtful to them, but us at the table think it's hilarious. And you also come up with song titles for your bard to play. And now they're not always magical, but they certainly have influence and things like that. And so I always think those, when you mention the name of a song that you're going to play in the tavern to try to set a mood, it really does. I get, if it's not an actual song in my head, I hear notes in my head and that kind of thing. So I think that's a really cool way to make cinematic play at the table.
All right, my second one, moving on to fighter class. And just in general, the Battle Master maneuvers, I think, are very cinematic. The riposte, describe how you lean just out of the way and complete your spin with your blade out to slice into the enemy as it stumbles because it missed you.
Yeah.
That sort of thing. The shoving with your shield to get advantage, calling out, to command an ally to be able to act on your action, those sorts of things. They're not as magical per se, but I think it's real easy to imagine action movie occurrences.
Yeah.
with that. And obviously you can build on. I'm already kind of thinking bigger than that. If you are an individual who likes the movie that jumps into mind is not as well known, but Nobody. Are you familiar with
I don't
that
think
one?
I know that one.
So it's a story of a deadly CIA operative or whatever who is retired and just trying to live a normal life, but circumstances don't let that happen.
Of course not.
And he feels, everybody thinks he's a wimp because he's worked so hard to not show what he can do. And he's finally had enough, and he's on a bus one night where some Russian mafia thugs are getting ready to do some pretty awful things to some people on the bus. And he gets to the front of the bus at the stop, tells the bus driver to get off, closes the door, turns around, and tells them he's going to F them up. And they just laugh, and he just goes at it with them. And he's getting beat up too. So I think you could use those descriptors in your description of your fighter.
Right.
Blood is streaming, but he takes a breath and comes at him again. And that sort of thing I think can be really fun.
I love it. That's cool. Mine actually stays in that same realm, and this is from the 2025 Player's Handbook. The weapon mastery properties. They are, some of them are cleave, where when you're attacking a creature, but there's another creature within the 5 feet, based on the rolls that you do, of course, but you can potentially cleave through the first one and hit the second one as well, which
Right.
I think there's some really cool things there. Graze is another one, can do damage on a miss equal to the ability modifier. So I'm thinking, and I think this goes along with usually heavier, like a great sword or something, to where you miss technically, but because of the sheer size and power of the weapon, you do grazing damage, which is less, but it's something. It's not just a zero. Well, okay, we move on. A push. I'm trying to think what uses a push. I don't remember, but where you hit and then it pushes you back 10 feet.
Shield Master is a feat that does that.
And some of the other heavier weapons. I want to say it's like a mace or something, but I don't know. Sap. You hit a creature and it has disadvantage for its next attack. I think the War Pick does that, to where the damage is such that they have a hard time recuperating from it. Here's another one that's similar, and I know great bows and great crossbows do this. Slow, where a creature is reduced, its speed is reduced by 10 feet because of the blow that the arrow or whatever it is does to it. Topple causes a con save that could potentially knock them down prone on a hit. And then Vex is when you hit the creature, you get advantage on your next attack on them because it knocks them off balance and gives you a chance to have better. So I think there's a lot of ways to describe those things, or as you're really good at doing at the table, letting the player describe how that happens. So you have vexed that player, describe what that looks like and how that's going to affect your next attack or something like that, and let the players get involved, which then gets that picture in everybody's head. And I know we've got some players at our table that will actually stand up and show.
Yes.
Which I think is awesome. I love it when that happens.
That's part of the beauty of the game.
Yeah.
All right, moving on to a couple of more magical type things. So Wizard, there's a few others that can do this, but I'll combine these together. Either Misty Step or Dimension Door.
Love it.
And I think visually, those offer some pretty fun. What does Misty Step look like? And in my mind, I see, like when you have a fog, like in a movie, they have a fog machine, but then they run it backwards.
Oh yeah. Oh, cool.
I can see that. Like that's how I envision
I
Misty
love it.
Step.
Yeah.
Poof, whoop, and then you're somewhere else with
cool.
sound and vision. And Dimension Door might be a little more Fey-like, sparkles and sort of rainbowish colors maybe. But I mean, that's just mine. It's limitless how you can make this happen.
Right. And I like that it could be different for different, like you mentioned, the Fae. What if a demon creates a dimension door, or a dragon creates a dimension door? The sizes, the way they look, what's inside of it, all that kind of stuff could be different depending on what cast it. No, those are great. I always picture Misty Step as you sort of like turn into mist and then reshape someplace else. Like the part, I'm trying to think. Oh, like Star Trek.
Yes.
When they go, what is it they call it? They
beam me up.
Beam me up. Misty Step works kind of like a beam me up type of thing. But I guess that would be more like a teleport technically. But nonetheless, it's how I see it. My number 2 is the Rogue class feature cunning action. Mm-hmm. I just think that looks, in my mind, when a rogue does the cunning action as a bonus action. So what I'm picturing is when they do like a stabby stab and then, disengage and run. Mm-hmm. Because if I'm remembering this right, you get the attack, boom, stabby stab. Then you use your bonus action to disengage, which I don't know what that looks like. That, it's some sort of a parry or a as they say, cunning action, like a sly step as the sword, the parry of their sword comes past you, and then you use your move action to go your 30 feet. There's a lot of like cool ways to describe how that happens. And I don't know. I've just always pictured that when people do it. And now that I'm playing the Tabaxi Rogue, I've got all these pictures in my head of what that looks like when you disengage and move. There's a lot of cool things that I can see there. I picture Black Widow. Let's just be honest.
Yes. Well, who doesn't?
Yeah, right. Exactly.
All right. That reminds me of one. I'll come back maybe my last one. Okay. So staying with magic users here for my number 2, this is one that you've done really successfully for us, is the Wild Magic Surge. When you roll, when the sorcerer's magic goes wrong, and they give you a table, which is fun.
Yeah.
And I can remember the dungeon dudes. Potted plant. They were really looking for that, hoping for that.
Yeah.
But what I remembered is when you had the sudden appearance of several gnomes viciously beating each other up. And just the image and the swears and everything else.
Yes.
These little guys just pummeling the crap out of each other was just very, hilarity erupted around the table, let's say, when that happened.
Yes, that was fun.
So those sorts of things.
That was in Eberron, I believe,
yes,
where that happened.
Yes. And for me, I can't do those spur of the moment. I have to have, but I think as a DM or a player, it's good to have a list of those maybe ready to go.
Yeah.
To be able to sort of liven things up a little bit. I mean, there are people obviously who are very quick on their feet and just do that.
Right.
I'm not one of them. I need to.
Neither am I.
Need to have it scripted a little bit.
Same. Yeah, Wild Magic offers a lot of opportunity for some cinematic things like the potted plants. Were you expecting something great and and a rhododendron shows up? All right, my last one has actually been in cinema not too terribly long ago. And that is the Druid's Wild Shape from the Dungeons and Dragons movie, Honor Among Thieves. They really did a nice job with that. They extended, and this got criticism because they took some liberties with the how many times you can actually
can't do that.
Right, exactly. But it was still really cool to see on the screen, but you can stay within the rules and create that image.
That was a rule of cool thing.
It totally was. And it totally worked for me.
Yes.
But the wild shape I always have thought would look really cool as it happens. I'm picturing like if you're fighting a bunch of thugs. It's just regular, standard humanoid thugs, and then a bear shows up in front of them. Just like it did in the movie when it became the owl bear, I mean, just the sheer shock and dismay of what's about to happen, and then watching what the bear or the owl bear does to those people that are standing in front of it thinking they were just going to be all tough. And that didn't quite work out that way. But I think that sounds really cool. And they changed, I don't remember them off the top of my head. In the 25 book, there's some changes that make it a little bit more possible to do something closer to what they did in the movie.
Yeah. All right. My final one is going very basic, going back to the monk.
Cool.
With the unarmed strike.
Nice.
Because that just, you can think of any Marvel movie, any martial art you may have studied,
Yep.
any of those things, to just throw a lot of flavor in, a roundhouse to the temple, or a spin heel that catches them across the jaw, and those sorts of things. And what I was going to say, this works almost more for the rogue, I think, than monk. But there's a video out there. This shows the depths of my YouTube obsession. But there was a short video out there of some like two actors backstage at some like local production that were arguing, and one of it, but is in Spanish. So, and you've got all the makeup on from the stage, so they look a little bit off kilter. And one of them's just jawing at this guy. And this guy is just silent, just watching him out of the corner of his eye, and you can tell he's just had it. And he finally goes, "Miraki, Miraki," and holds up a hand. And the other guy looks at it, and the guy takes his other hand and just smacks him across the face as hard as he can. and the guy that gets hit, he doesn't know what to do. Like, it just shocks him, and you see his eyes widen, and he kind of grabs his cheek, and he looks like he's getting ready to cry, which is like the worst thing you can do in those situations.
Right.
But I can kind of picture a monk doing something. You could have a monk do something similar
That
for
trickery,
the unarmed strike.
yes.
Yeah.
That's cool. When I played Wade a while back, and you were always so good about, I would say what happened, but then I'd look at you and you'd be like, oh, and you'd give some sort of a move that I'd never heard of before, and I'm like, yeah, that. And I'm picturing, so the visual there is so cool. And what I love about all of these that we've mentioned today, so thank you for playing along with this. Mm-hmm. But what I love is that everybody at the table gets a vision.
Yeah.
But it's probably different for everybody. Like, the way I picture our group, I'm sure looks very different from what everyone else pictures the group. But one thing that does help, and I was going to say this back when you're, I don't remember we were talking about what, but is the table, the terrain that you build and things. And I love it when we're talking about something that someone's going to do, and everybody like leans down and is like trying to get the POV of the players or the characters on the table, and everyone's like, yeah, I think right through there.
You've got line of sight.
And all of us, I know all of us have a picture on what that's going to look like. Like, I will never forget when, I'm trying to think what party it is. It's the one where I shot Marcus in the back like 3 times in one battle. But I was in an alleyway, and there was a narrow, like, like I could hit the guy, but Mark was sort of in between me and the guy.
That was Burton Wade.
Okay, that was. Okay. And I just shot. We're like, there's sight line there. We can do that. And I'm just picturing what that would look like standing in the alley, looking down. And nonetheless, I still shot Bert in the back. Well, when you're a furball, you should expect to get things in the back because you're so big. So just saying, Bert. Anyway, this has been tons of fun. And I hope that when you are playing at your table, that create that cinematic for your players. If they aren't doing it for each other, as the DM, create that and try to encourage them. Some people just aren't into it, and that's okay. That's all right if someone doesn't want to do that. But I know that you have players at your table that want to. It's almost like the role-playing thing. Some people aren't comfortable with role-playing and others are, but some need that coaxing to get there. Sometimes at role-play, it takes the cinematic first, and then the role-play comes along with it. So really shoot for creating those cinematic moments for your players by using the rules that are given to us in the Player's Handbook and Dungeon Master's Guide. Mm-hmm. So any follow-ups or thoughts on that?
The only other thing that crept into my head was more general, and we learned this, I heard this before, but this is one of the things that Joe Gorman told our kids last year at summer camp was the yes and principle, that whenever someone at the table starts down a path, if it's different from what you want, that's fine, but don't say no, say yes, and also this other thing. And so so build on each other's and work with each other and be very generous in creating the vision. Let people have their.
I love that. Yeah, because it's about making, telling that story, sharing that story, but letting everybody have a hand in it. Mm-hmm. So, Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us today here in the dungeon on Teachers in the Dungeon. If you've done some great cinematic moves in your game, or you've just used some rules to create that for your players, let us know. teachersinthedungeon@gmail.com. Shout us out on social media, Instagram and Facebook. Teachers in the Dungeon. We're on X at Dungeon Teachers, and on YouTube as well. So for Dan, I am Tom, and for the cat sitting on the bed, until next time, keep rolling those 20s. See you later, folks.